basically he whispers into Eve's ear, and we associate the serpent to being deceptive or to being evil, when it could be the exact opposite. It could be, he was wise, at least. So the serpent is an ancient symbol of wisdom, because in ancient language and ancient linguistic roots, the serpent is associated with sharpness of vision. And this comes from the ancient Greek language of and Hebrew as well, of ophio, which literally means sharpness of vision in the Strong's Hebrew lexicon. And so it was seen that the serpent has a vision, an ability to perceive beyond what the typical human perception can see.
Ah, Jafar, my most trusted advisor. I am in desperate need of your wisdom.
My life is but to serve you, my lord.
And this attributes scientifically as the serpent can literally, they have a heat sensing vision, so they can see in the infrared spectrum, so they can see beyond what human perception can see. They can see heat, like many animals can. Many animals can sense outside of our electromagnetic spectrum of ultraviolet and infrared. They can see heat, they can see ultraviolet rays and all of that.
Hello everyone, my name is Cullen Smith. I'm a published author. Today I would like to introduce you all to my brand new published book, The Hive Mind Invasion of Civilization, a compendium of esoteric science, symbolism, and universal secrets. If you'd like to purchase this book, you can head over to my brand new website that I've set up at liftingtheveil.tv, and I will see all of you there. Snakes have sight beyond sight because they can see in the infrared spectrum. So in other words, they have heat vision. They can sense infrared heat. So they have thermal vision. So they can see beyond the typical spectrum of visible light that humans can see. So they have the sight beyond sight. And they sense this heat around them by taking in, they smell through their tongue, but they also send information into the heat sensing membranes, which allows them to have the thermal vision. And these two cones, or these cones of vision, overlap directly at the center, leaving a perfectly visible Vesica Pisces geometry visual pattern. The eye of the snake, the third eye, the all-seeing eye, the parietal eye, a vestigial remnant of the reptilian anatomy, the reptilian physiology, which the human brain is segmented into three main segments. You have the pons, or in other words, the brain stem, which regards to survival and direct basic needs, and then you have the midbrain, which relates to emotions, and which is the mammalian brain, which relates to emotions and temperature regulation and hormone production. And then you have the newest development of the brain, which is the neocortex, which is related to higher thinking and higher cognitive abilities, rational functioning, problem solving. So the reptilian portion of the brain is referring to the most basic urges of human nature, which is survival and the basic needs of human survival. Again, the inner eye, the third eye, as everyone knows by now, the pineal gland, is regulated by the Kundalini serpent energy of the body's central nervous ganglia. In other words, gangs or networks of glial cells, of glia, which are neural cells, which represents enlightenment, or in other words, light within the mind. The serpent energy represents life, rebirth, fertility, divinity, and royalty, as shown by the basilisk, which means King Serpent, which comes from the root word of basil, which means king or royalty. Basil or basil, king or royalty, which is exactly why the king pharaohs wore the uraeus cobra, or in other words, the king cobra on the third eye, which just so happens that the pons, the brainstem, and the thalamus portion of the inner brain is known as the reptilian complex, which corresponds to the very base of animal functioning, the basic animal nature, or in other words, the base, which means the very base of the human brain, the bottommost segment of the human brain, which relates directly to survival and instinct, which is why it's called the basal ganglia or the basal ganglia. Literally means the base of the brain. It's the most basic ganglia of the human brain, which is why the base of the brain, or the basal ganglia, looks exactly like a hooded cobra standing on its tail, standing erect. Exactly like the uraeus cobra on the pharaoh's third eye, stands erect, which is a direct representation of the pons. It's a direct representation of the reptilian complex of the human brain. It's a direct representation of royalty, of the king's chamber, of the third ventricle, the serpent, the snake eye.
And so now you finally understand why the pharaoh's headdress is designed strategically, specifically, to allude to the process of enlightenment of the serpent, the light of the serpent of light. Yet again, the serpent clan, wise as serpents, the dragon lineage.
Snake. I'm a snake. I'm a snake.
The pineal gland is the only midline brain structure that is unpaired or azygous. It's not directly bisymmetrical, and it takes its name from its pine cone shape.
He told me he smuggled Jamie Lannister into Dorne.
Who's that?
Jamie fucking Lannister.
Only one God can save us, but not without his eye. Jamie?
That's a storm. Sets hunters right in the pets. We should run! Run? We mortals do it all the time!
Ages have passed since the gods walked among us.
Get out the snake with a swarm of motor flies. Get out the snake under the collar.
Sirgar, do we have one sign? Moses. Oh!
Kiss the serpent. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. If we kiss it without fear, it'll take us through the garden.
Is it a dream where you see yourself standing in sort of sun god robes on a pyramid with 1,000 naked women?
Ride the snake.
Listen, we have one sign the likes of which even God has never seen.
Then you shouldn't be afraid to ride.
Ride the snake.
Hello and welcome to the $100,000 pyramid, our guest. Can't you feel the darkness?
I'm a knight. I'm a knight from the sea.
Either that or it's just a big ugly eye and I hate it.
Only one God can save us, but not without his eye.
Through the all-seeing eye.
Snake eyes.
You got snake eyes!
A snakeskin jacket!
I found it. Him. There.
It's a third-degree master mason of the Blue Line.
Hey!
Yes, so yet again we have the essence of the serpent and the eye of the serpent or the snake eye, representing the symbol of enlightenment. Again, the serpent of light, representing the serpent of the cosmic light, as well as the solar light, electric light, the electromagnetic plasmoid. And so we are yet again referring to the essence of the sight of the serpent sight, and the serpent of light, and the light of electricity, and enlightenment of consciousness.
Oh my god, the satanic!
And so this is how yet again the eye associated to light and enlightenment, and the eye associated with the sun is via what's known as the sundog, which is where the light refracts in a 360-degree spherical manner around as a halo around the sun, due to the level of ice crystals in the atmosphere. And so again we have the sun associated to the light, and so associated with enlightenment, and literally the eye of God, or the eye of the sun,
Which contains the cosmic eye within its core. As the god Hurricane, the eye of God, the eye of Ra. The eye of Ra was actually the eye of Saturn, or in other words, as Tolkien depicted, the eye of Sauron. Again, the evil eye, basically the serpent, the reptilian eye, the snake eye, as I covered so in depth in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 as well. But so we'll have to go back and I'll have to tie that into here as well, just to show you how significant this is. And so again, as Jormungandr in Norse mythology, there also is another story in the legends of the Norse, of a story of a king and who adopted a small lindworm or a serpent monster as a gift to his daughter. Eventually it grows so large that it encircles the girl's home. The king promises the daughter's hand in marriage to whoever kills the beast, and eventually the feat is accomplished by Ragnar Lodbrok, a legendary Norse Viking. And later Ragnar is said to have had a son, and the son is born with the strange image in his eye, basically a defect or a type of image in his eye that was equated as the serpent as a white snake, or the Ouroboros encircling his iris, biting its own tail. Therefore the son was named Sigurd, Snake in the Eye. So in other words, yet again, the the archetypal universal connection to the snake eye, or the serpent in the eye, the snake eyes. And we covered this so much, literally almost the entire Symbols of Power Part 2 film was dedicated entirely to the symbolism of the serpent and the snake eye. So I'll give you a few examples here just to tie this in, to show you how significant it is. But please go back and watch the Symbols of Power Part 2 film once again and revisit that film.
In the villa of all men, in the villa of all men, stands a solitary candle. At the center of it all, at the center of it all.
The mind's eye, the third eye, lies directly in the center of the human skull. The pineal is sensitive to light and generates its own source of perceptual light as dimethyltryptamine. It's known as the seat of the soul and the receptor of consciousness. It is the receiver of sight beyond sight.
The Eye of Thundera, a Thundercat's in danger.
The wavelength beyond the visible light spectrum of far infrared to ultraviolet. Your spiritual eyes, the eyes that you use to see when dreaming, the eyes that see in the dark when you sleep. The solitary candle that burns throughout the night. It is said, if thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light.
And notice how it's called the Villa of Ormond, which, when he says it in his English accent, sounds exactly similar to the Villa of Amen, which, as I've covered in one of my previous articles, the Villa of Amen of the human skull, the foramen being a hole where the nerves pass through. So it's the chamber of Amen, the solitary candle, the eternal flame, the light within the mind, the torch that bears through the underworld, the torch that is lit to carry through the underworld. All this is leading us to the rudimentary eye in the human brain. The pitta linked to the word ophthalmos. Ophthalmos is ancient Greek meaning eye, as in the all-seeing eye, the pineal gland. The pitta that Iamblichus is writing about in his book De Mysteris Egyptorium, as the creative intellect, the Lord of the truth and knowledge, the pitta who will become pitta. All the past and all the secrets are in the words and the sounds. A long journey from the origins for the most sacred artifact of Egypt. The word ophthalmos, secularly described as being from the root words ops, meaning eye, see optic. A form related to thalamus, meaning inner room or chamber, or in other words, the third ventricle, the innermost chamber, the Holy of Holies. So ophthalmos, meaning eye, is a compound word composing of eye and thalamus, meaning inner room chamber of the inner eye. And I've gotten into arguments with Stephen Banker's of Spirit Science and Metaphysics website over all this theology and the etymology. He claims that ophthalmos can't possibly be talking about the pineal gland, can't possibly be referring to the third eye, and it simply is used in the context regarding the external eyes. But that is not true at all, and I will prove that through the etymology. See, again, they say that it comes from the word ops, meaning eye, plus thalamus. They would have you believe that ophthalmos is a compound word of ops plus thalamus, but that's not the case at all. The prefix of the word-forming element ophi, O-P-H-I, however, refers to a serpent or snake. So look at the word again. It's ophthalmos, not ophthalmos. From the point of view of biological evolution, the pineal gland represents a kind of atrophied photoreceptor. which means a receiver of light. In the epithalamus of some species of amphibians and reptiles, such as snakes, it's linked to a vestigial organ known as the parietal eye. A parietal eye, also known as a third eye or pineal eye, is photoreceptive, meaning receptive to light. It's a receiver of light, and it's sensitive to light, and it emits its own light, and is associated with the pineal gland, regulating circadian rhythmicity, sleep and wake cycle, and hormone production for thermal regulation, body temperature regulation. The very fact that thalamus alone means inner chamber is a dead giveaway that it's referring to the third eye, the Holy of Holies, as it corresponds to Solomon's temple, the third ventricle of the human brain, which is direct midline between the left and right ventricles, or the twin, which are known as the twin pillars. So it's the third pillar of Freemasonry, which stands directly between the two pillars of the sun and the moon, the left and the right hemispheres, the left and the right ventricle, the twin pillars, of which the third pillar stands directly in the center, hence the third eye and the third ventricle.
And just to clarify, this graphic, this concept of the pyramid overlaid with the brain is originally the research of Gary Osborne. However, it should be made very crystal clear that the concept of the head being symbolically represented as encapsulated by the pyramid, by the triangle, goes way back to ancient times of the Pythagoreans, to the Elder Cathedral art, the stained glass artwork. It's a very ancient concept. It is embedded in the subliminal, symbolic concept of the very linguistics and the etymology, as I will be covering much deeper in future presentations, as the very etymology of the cap itself, the capstone, which literally means the head, the capitus, the capital, the head. It means the uppermost, the top, the pinnacle, the apex. It's embedded into the language itself. I mean, literally, for someone to think that they originally came up with this is utterly ridiculous. Although this image and the concept of the pyramid overlaid with the brain is the research of Gary Osborne, so I need to clarify that. However, yet again, I mean, I've completely shown the etymology and the linguistics here, which is entirely independent of that. From the very etymology of the ophthalmos, as we will be covering in this video, and the very etymology of the ophis, which means the serpent, also means the reference to wisdom. Literally means with the sharpness of vision. So we're talking about the innermost chamber. And again, as I've covered, the etymology of the fornix is literally the furnace. The innermost chamber, it literally means a vaulted archway, hence why I was talking about the fornix referring to a vaulted archway, hence why it literally links mentally to the vaulted archway or the king's queen's chamber, the vaulted archway inside the pyramid. It's not hard to come to, and it's not like you have to rip off somebody else's work in order to come to these conclusions entirely independently just by studying the linguistics and the symbolism alone. It is there.
So refer to this amulet of King Tutankhamun's tomb, the amulet of the Uraeus serpent, where the Uraeus symbol was made to represent the goddess Wadjet, which was the ancient Egyptian serpent goddess. It was a serpent deity, and what this amulet is depicting with the Uraeus is it's depicting snake eyes.
So we had just covered the significance of the connection to the sun with the Ouroboros, or the world cosmic serpent, and again through the symbolism and the actual science of Birkeland currents. Yet again, the connections to the sun run very deep with the cosmic serpent or with the Ouroboros symbolism. So this goes all the way back to ancient Egyptian symbolism of the Uraeus serpent, basically the sun disk, And I could go so deep. I mean, this opens up a can. I could go so deep into the symbolism of why it's the solar disk and why it's the halo, it's the halos, and the entire etymology and symbolism of the sun and the ring of light and the halo and the enlightenment and the corona and the crown and the keren and the crown of thorns and the crown of horns and the solar enlightenment, the aura, the aureos, the aureola, the laureate, why you wear the crown of the sun, the crown of the halo, the crown of the king, on and on and on. But I mean, that will open up a whole can. So that will be entirely covered in future entire full films on its own, as well as will be written so much more as basically the whole theme of my books coming out. And the first images of the Ouroboros being associated to the Eye of Ra, or in other words, the Eye of Horus. Such as we covered in Symbols of Power Part 2, is the significance of both the serpent and the eye. And this again brings us back to the North Pole of Saturn and the Ouroboros, or the cosmic serpent, being symbolized as the world serpent, the Aurora Borealis on the North Pole of Saturn, surrounding literally what is the cosmic eye, or the Eye of Ra. Because in ancient Egyptian theology or cosmology, Ra was actually attributed to Saturn, not necessarily the sun, or what we would call Sol, Greek Helios. In other words, our current, our orange or white sun in the sky. And this, of course, brings us into the huge subject, which is a central theme to many of my full videos and full presentations, and many of my previous articles and presentation works, revolving around the revelations of Immanuel Velikovsky, as well as the subsequent Thunderbolts project and David Talbot's The Saturn Myth, as well as a good friend and colleague of his, Wallace Thornhill, and the entire Thunderbolts cosmology project, which again, my work ties heavily into adding much more mythology and much more symbolism and ancient cosmology and theology to that body of works that they have provided, which dovetails entirely in with that. But so to not rehash too much of that information, this gets us back into all of that entire theme of the ancient Saturn as being the best sun, being overthrown by our modern sun, or what we now know as Sol, Helios, which were confused between being Saturn and the sun as we know it today. And I've covered in numerous videos and presentations as to why that is, and the real reason as to why that is could have also been, being a central sun within our solar system as well. Beyond all of that is the actual universal truth, and the reason behind that being, it's the duality of the sun, the two suns, the two brothers, the two twins between Horus and Set, the light sun and the dark sun, the white sun and the black sun, that overthrow and overturn one another, which is the symbolism of the ancient Egyptian Ouroboros as being half white, half black. Basically a Western rendition of the yin yang, which itself is a rendition of the Taurus dynamic, which, as we covered in the beginning of this film. So it's again a rehashing of that twin duality polarity dynamic that reverses polarity and it flips, and it reverses axial polarity and it flips on itself, as we experience every seasonal year on a macrocosmic scale, as the sun, as this ruled by the sun and ruled by the black sun of Saturn as winter. So in other words, we're talking about the duality of the bicycle of the year, summer and winter, the oak king and the holly king. And so now you understand why the night king, the king of the winter season, is the horned one, is the horned god. Two brothers or the two sisters, the red queen and the white queen, that overthrow, and they always struggle and they fight with one another, Jacob and Esau, on and on and on. These dualities between all, encompassed in all of the mythologies and all of the archetypal stories and theologies the world over. Quote from some of David Talbot's works here, and as well as many of the ancient historians also attribute, such as Hyginus in listing the planets' names, first Jupiter, then the planet of Sol, others say of Saturn, or a Greek ostracon cited by the eminent classicist Franz Boll identifies Egyptian sun god Ra not with our sun but with the planet Saturn. This repeated the confusion of the sun and Saturn, which seems to make no sense at all, and which the Babylonians, the founders of astronomy, identified as the exemplary light of heaven, the sun god Shamash. Shamash is the planet Saturn, the astronomical texts say. In archaic copies of Plato's Timaeus, the word for the planet Saturn is Helios, the sun god. Popular Greek traditions identified Saturn as Kronos, alter ego of Helios, and Kronos is said to have ruled over the pole. The Popol Vuh, lauded as the Mayan Bible, attests to the same idea. The natives of Mexico recall that prior to the present age, an exemplary sun ruled the world, but this was not the sun of today. His name was Quetzalcoatl, or in other words, the feathered serpent, the plumed serpent. And particularly Quetzal literally means long green feather, because it comes from the quetzal bird, known for its long green feathers, and this is why Quetzalcoatl is attributed to the color green or turquoise green. The direct correlation with the aurora borealis, as I call it, the aurora, the green glow, the green halo, the green ring of light of the northern lights. And of course, Quetzalcoatl, or also Aztec correspondent as Kukulkan, is attributed to the resurrected god, the resurrected deity, the rebirthing, the reborn. Again, the serpent aspect of resurrection and rebirth, which is why the Quetzal bird is literally the South American attribution of the Asian and the Western version of the phoenix, the bird of resurrection, the long feathered tailed bird which is seen flying as the feathered dragon flying through the sky, flying through the air, once again corresponding directly with the aurora borealis and the cosmic serpent as well. So on many scales and many aspects, this is universal truth. The unbelievable synchronicity here is that Aztec word, the equivalent of Quetzal, is Aztec kukul, meaning feather, once again. So, and this is no coincidence as to why, according to what I am going to be breaking down in many of my future presentations and articles and books and everything, is this huge science that I'm decoding of onomantia, which is where your name literally determines the characteristics and the qualities that correlate with your life and your personality, the characteristics of who you are and what you achieve and what you become in life. Is there's a direct two-way correspondence between that resonance of the word and of the name with the actual events that occur and what becomes of you in life, such as the example of August Kekule, or in other words August Kukul, is famously known for his discovery of atomic structure, of the benzene molecular structure, when he took a nap by his fireplace while he was frustrated looking for answers as to the structure of this chemical compound of benzene. And while dreaming, he explored the image of atoms working together and eventually appearing to move and writhe like snakes or serpents in his vision. Suddenly, one of the snakes grabbed its tail in his mouth, prompting Kekule to awaken. This vision of the Ouroboros in atom form inspired Kekule to continue working out his equations until he was able to prove the form of the benzene molecule. And so again, his name was Kekule. Kukul, which is literally the green serpent, the feathered Aztec serpent, Kekule and Kukul. And we will get so much deeper into this in my future presentation, breaking down the KKK and the elongated skulls and so much more about the grand wizardry of the KKK, white supremacy, and you could wonder how this and Kek and so much more, and Kuk and so much more that goes in with that. It's an incredibly astonishing presentation, and I'm almost finished with that. It's been almost finished for several years now. I haven't been able to complete that, but we'll get so much deeper into that in future books, films, presentations, what have you. Future, and we have covered in previous presentations, is again Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, is the ring, the halo around the sun, of the corona of the sun, the ring of light. Again, the halo, the halos, literally means a ring of light around a sun or a star. And so this is again the feathers, the plumes of the solar corona, the crown of the King of Heaven, the crown of the sky. Again, the keren, the Hebrew keren, comes from, literally means horn, and it's the root word for crown. So in other words, the crown of horns, and it's the root word that gives us Kronos, Greek Kronos, corona, coronation, On and on and on. The root words of QRN, keren, which gives us corn, the hardened upper, keratin, the root substance of the hardness of the horn, which is rooted at the hardest part of the head, which is the top of the head, which is what literally a corn means. It means the hardest part, where the crown literally means the top or the uppermost part of the head. So this is why we have the crown of horns, the crown of thorns, the corona, the ring of light, the halo of halos, which halos literally means this, which means the sun. It means it's a halide, it's a solar gas. And the Maya maintained essentially the same idea, calling the primeval sun god Huracan, who was a one-legged serpent deity, equivalent to Greek Typhon, which was the typhoon. The serpent deity of chaos and destruction, of primordial waters. In other words, a huracan as hurricane. Again, the cosmic serpent, the cosmic Birkeland currents, which turn and whirl the world about on its axis. Tiamat in half, made from her ribs the vault of heaven and earth. And from this her tail became the Milky Way, the serpent tail of the Milky Way, which, as I will show here, the Milky Way, the dark rift, the gape, the gap, the gaping void of the great goddess of the womb, of the sky, of the abyss, is also the serpent goddess, the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, the rainbow serpent, which lies above. In Chaos Conf, the motifs of other mythologies linked directly or indirectly to the Tiamat myth, including Greek tradition of Apollo's slaying of the python. And this ties in exactly to the Greek mythology, which comes from the Egyptian mythology, the bark of Ra, who battles with the serpent monster Apophis, the chaos monster, in order for the rule of the cosmos, the order to emerge from the chaos of the cosmos. In the Greek myth of Zeus battling the serpent monster Typhon for the rule of the cosmos. When Zeus slays Typhon, the serpent monster of chaos, and defeated, Typhon is cast down into Tartarus by the angry Zeus. The serpent water god Typhon, where we get the typhoon, the water storm of destruction. Hercules, who slays the Hydra. The clash of the Titans, referring to the primordial chaos, a cataclysmic era in the past of when the planets were according to Immanuel Velikovsky, were worlds in collision. The planets were in conflict, and vast electrical discharges being emitted between the two, the time of great cataclysm. And this relates to the field of cymatics, which is the sound resonance, where particles within a medium will vibrate at specific rates, at specific frequencies, and will achieve exceedingly increasing rates of higher order. But those periods of order have to transition through periods of chaos. And this is likely what happens in planetary solar systems throughout the universe, is when they enter energetic resonances of higher order, the particles, the planets within this medium will engage through periods of chaos until they achieve higher magnitudes of order or higher structure of order through those periods of chaos. The name Tiamat is a cognate for the word sea. Tiamat has also been claimed to be cognate with the Northwest Semitic Tehom, meaning the deeps, abyss, in the book of Genesis. Robert Graves considered Tiamat's death by Marduk as evidence for his hypothesis of an ancient shift in power from a matriarchal society to the later patriarchal society. Graves' ideas were later developed into the Great Goddess theory. Theory suggests that Tiamat and other ancient monster figures were presented as former supreme deities of peaceful, woman-centered religions that were turned later into monsters when violent. In other words, they were later demonized and cast down. Their defeat at the hands of the male hero corresponded to the manner in which male-dominated religions overthrew an ancient peaceful society. In Greek mythology, Poseidon sent the sea monster, the sea serpent monster, Cetus, who was defeated by Perseus, Perseus slayed the serpent sea monster. He slayed the kraken, the monster of the deep waters.
Is the way that we associate this to basically to being sharp of the tongue. In other words, being very gifted with the tongue and gifted with the speech in order to control people's minds. And we know this through various stories, such as J.R.R. Tolkien's works of The Lord of the Rings, and where, you know, one of his main evil sidekicks to the evil character Sauron was known as Wormtongue. And Wormtongue, the roots of worm literally comes from the Norse roots of orm, which means snake or serpent. And so the worm originally means serpent. It means snake. So Wormtongue literally means speaking with a forked tongue. In other words, with a serpent's tongue. So it's referring to the gift. And so Wormtongue controls the true king of the land. He controls the king by whispering dark spells into his ear, by whispering, you know, these curses or these spells into his ears to control the king's mind. So he keeps him under a dark spell through his forked tongue. So, and we find this all throughout, you know, cultural myths. We find it in Aladdin, where the evil sorcerer Jafar, he carries the serpent staff. So he carries the wisdom and the magic and the sorcery of the serpent. And he controls people's minds. He keeps them under a spell by manipulating them with the serpent staff, which is symbolic of the serpent's tongue, which is symbolic of the language controlling their mind and keeping them under a spell.
The slippery snake in the grass does this, and this reminds me back to, I played a character back in 6th grade in drama, in theater. I played the evil villain, and his name was Silas Snakebreath. I mean, see, these essences, they play out throughout our lives in so many ways that we don't even realize until we start to awaken to them. But yeah, so I was literally the character. I was Silas Snakebreath, who was a snake oil salesman. That's a lot of alliteration right there. But yeah, it's so poignant, and it means so that's the whole main essence of what this new presentation that I will be working on. And although I'm basically revealing the whole thing to you right here, not the whole thing, but it's not as nearly as well written as I have it in the full presentation and as it will be. But this is just a rough draft, and we'll go over this content. You know, why not cover it multiple times in multiple different ways? But so this is going to bring us right back full circle, back around to everything that we've already covered, again, back in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3. Literally the entire context of both of those entire films. We're coming full circle back into getting the exact same thing. So the snake oil is, again, the snake oil is the serpent oil, is the cerebrospinal fluid of the human spinal column. It's essentially, it's likened, it is symbolized by the oil of the lamp, of the thermometer that rises, the oil of the lamp which lights the light of enlightenment of consciousness within the thalamus, which is what the two serpents and the golden egg at the top represent. The Jack and the Beanstalk hunting for the golden goose eggs atop the beanstalk. In other words, the dual helicoil cord, the axis mundi, the ladder to heaven, the stairway to heaven, the stairway to enlightenment, the stairway to God, this on and on and on, these same universal archetypal motif of consciousness, of enlightenment. The light of the candlestick, which is the human spinal column, and the cerebrospinal fluid is the oil. It's not literally an oil. Everyone online is going all sorts of all off into crazy fantasies all about this, about, oh, it's a claustrum oil. Oh, it's the claustrum produces every substance that drives the whole nervous system. That's not accurate in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. You have no basis, no proof for any of that. You cannot point to any source of evidence other than that, other than someone's theories and someone's words. That is not medically accurate. The claustrum produces zero oil whatsoever. It is a little thin membrane of gray matter, and it is literally the densest portion of neural connections in the entire brain. It is literally, which way they consider it, the seat of consciousness. But it produces no liquid. It's a dense fibrous membrane of neurons. That is one of the densest networks of neurons in the entire brain, and it produces no oil. So the oil it's a metaphor for, maybe in ancient times they actually thought the cerebrospinal fluid was an oil. Maybe that could be an very good explanation of it. But it's not actually an oil. It's likened to an oil. So I thought this for a long time, and I also propagated this myth. I thought the cerebrospinal fluid was an oily substance, but that's not what it is whatsoever. It's mostly just entirely salt water. It's a saline solution. It's salt, the salt of salvation. We covered all this in Symbols of Power Part 2. Go back and see that entire film so that you'll know. It'll explain everything I'm talking about so much deeper, but so that's it. So yeah, the gateway of consciousness, the gateway of the initiation. We'll cover this so much more in future films also. So that's what the two serpents, the 101, the golden egg, the snake oil, actually what it is, the snake oil of the oil of the lamp, the oil of consciousness of the serpentine spinal column, the serpentine human spinal column, which all vertebrates come from their spine. The snake, the serpent spine is literally the most primordial, and even though not all life comes from, the reptile supposedly comes from fish, but either way, our entire anatomical recapitulation of the serpent, of our reptilian, the most basic fundamental reptilian nature is found all throughout our physiology, from the serpent seed of our semen, which then impregnates the egg, the serpent and the egg, and we covered all this in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 once again. So the serpent and the egg, once again, the serpent and the golden egg, the serpent and the seed, the serpent which protects the fruit, which is the seed becomes the fruit of knowledge, of the tree of life, which is the tree of genetics, of phylogenetic taxa, the phylogenetic tree of life, the DNA, on and on and on. And we will get much deeper into this in my next full presentation that I'm working on right now. So I'm just recapitulating everything that I'm already covering and all these other things that will manifest. So we're going off we're going off into deep tangents here. And so this is a graphic I made several years back, shortly after I had finished the Symbols of Power Part 3 film, and it's reiterating so many of the things that we covered about the cosmic egg and the golden ratio egg in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3. That's why I included the clip at the beginning of the video about the tripartite levels of creation, the trinity of creation, from mental to emotional to physical, again, which is mind, heart, and genitals. So you have the three layers of the trinity of creation, the three levels: mental, emotional, and physical, once again. And so I covered that thoroughly in depth in Symbols of Power Part 3, and we covered the significance and the meaning of the serpent eating the egg, and the serpent, and again, from as above, so below the belt, from inside the brain to its correspondence and direct geometrical and physiological homologous correspondence to the female uterus. So again, this is where we can find all these exact symbols. Yet again, is we find the golden egg, yet again, is the thalamus within the human brain. And again, I connected that as to the meaning of the Egyptian deity of Kneph, or the Masonic depictions of Kneph, which is the winged egg, the flying egg, which comes from the Egyptian deity of Khnum, who was the ram-headed creator god, created himself by fashioned the primordial egg from which hatched the sun and the earth, then sat at the potter's wheel and fashioned the gods and men and all other life, and created all the languages of the human race. The potter, who basically he spun the wheel and molded the primordial cosmic egg from clay. Just as you spin a potter's wheel and you fashion a pot out of clay, he fashioned the cosmic world egg. And so again, the winged egg, the winged disc, is the human brain, is the human consciousness of ascension. The wings of the two wings of the cherubim, the wings of the kundalini serpents rising up and sprouting wings from crawling on the ground to the serpent, to sprouting the wings of the eagle, which again corresponds to astrotheologically as from Scorpio, the various aspects of the transcendence of Scorpio, from crawling on the ground to its ascended form as the eagle. So this is the true meaning of the Egyptian serpent and the bird, which was the Oreos serpent, or the Wajet.
An inferior projection, the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, forms part of the nasal septum. The crista galli projects superiorly from the ethmoid bone and serves as the attachment point for the falx cerebri, a dural fold. Extending laterally from the crista galli is the cribriform plate, a perforated area through which the olfactory nerves pass. The two L-shaped palatine bones form the posterior third of the hard palate, part of the nasal cavity, and a portion of the orbit. The small, thin lacrimal bones make up the anterior portion of the medial wall of each orbit. A groove known as the lacrimal groove helps to form the nasolacrimal canal, which contains a duct that allows tears to travel to the nasal cavity. The vomer is an elongated, plow-shaped bone that forms the inferior and posterior part of the nasal septum. The internal and external skull bones articulate precisely, forming an intricate structure perfectly suited to its functions.
So now we're going to have to come full circle back to the Symbols of Power Part 2, Part 1, and the Part 3 films, where all of which I covered the previous esoteric anatomy regarding the conquering or the taming or the subduing of the serpent, and the serpent energy and the kundalini energy and the human physiology of overcoming the lower basal nature, which is serpentine at its essence, and how the human physiology itself is serpentine, is capitulate of a serpentine nature from the serpentine spinal column of all vertebrates to the central nervous system, including how I've discovered that sphenoid bone in the spinal column itself is reminiscent of the dragon within, as well as the inner dragon of the cerebrospinal fluid system, of how the central cerebrospinal canal resembles what I like to think of as a water dragon, in other words, a water serpent, a sea serpent, which leads us to the hero's journey of all mythology, revolves entirely around taming or how to train your dragon. So in some mythologies and legend, it refers to slaying or conquering the dragon, when the truth is the dragon represents our most powerful primal essence, our most powerful subconscious nature, which needs to be harnessed and utilized, as depicted in Game of Thrones, the mother of dragons, the dragon mother. And again, as I fully covered back in Symbols of Power Part 3, as well as Part 2, I covered the whole mythology of the serpent dragon monster of the deep abyss, of the chaos monster, the female dragon mother, the mother of dragons, which goes back to ancient myth of Marduk slaying Tiamat. And Tiamat was the chaos serpent monster of the deep abyss, which is exactly what they're depicting in Aquaman, just a rehash and retelling of Neptune, Marduk, conquering Tiamat, of the mother of the abysmal chaos, and he slays her, and he's wielding the weapon of the Vajra, or the lightning bolt of the gods. In other words, the Sai. It's a three-pronged weapon, which then became the Hindu Trishula of Shiva, who is also tames or conquers the serpent, the lower nature, and who also wields the trident, which I call it the Psident, because the Psident comes from the ancient Greek letter psi, which literally means a form of psychic energy, which is why Aquaman wields the trident of King Atlan, and when he becomes the king and he takes the throne, his rightful place upon the throne, which is located where? Directly between the eyes of the great serpent monster of the abyss, between the eyes of the great dragon, which is literally where the Sella Turcica is in the human skull, on the sphenoid bone. It's symbolically depicting the actual chariot or the throne of God, the dragon throne. And so this is why, again, Marduk slayed Tiamat with the Sident, and this is why Aquaman carries the Sident, and he conquers Tiamat, the chaos dragon monster of the abyss. Then he gains his psychic power, and he commands the power of the 7 seas after uniting the 7, which is representative symbolically of the esoteric nature of ascending the throne of the Kundalini rising, of the harnessing of the ascended mastery, of the 7 chakras, of the 7 energy centers, uniting the 7. And 7 is related to Hindu Shiva. Shiva is the Lord of 7. In Hebrew, it's known as Shivan, or sitting Shiva. And so again, Shiva is the Lord he is the Lord of chaos. He is the controller of the chaotic nature, and this is symbolized by wrapping the serpent around his neck. And this is exactly why in Game of Thrones, the king, the true king, ascends to the true heir to the throne, ascends to the throne by slaying the chaos dragon queen, the chaos monster of evil of the chaos of the abyss. And then what does he slay her with? He slays her with the Sident, with the Sai, the 3-pronged weapon, and nobody has any clue of the symbolism that was here. It's all here. The dragon throne, the true heir, the true king, the true heir to the throne, slaying the dragon monster of the abysmal chaos. It's all here. I've decoded the whole thing. It's perfect. And this is exactly why the trident or the Sident is symbolic of the human brain, as well as it's in Hinduism, it's known as the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, the Holy Trinity united of the central nervous system. And I've discovered how Aquaman's trident is literally exactly the same representation of the human brain, central nervous system, and the spinal column, complete with the little sacrum at the very base of the trident or the Sident. And this is why they symbolically depict him holding the Sident directly over his face, where the Sai is presented in the brain. And as he emits his psychic power and commands over the 7 waters, the 7 seas. He recruits the great serpent dragon monster of the abyss to do his bidding, because he conquers the lower nature and utilizes his psychic potential, riding on the dragon throne. And this is where we get the myth or the story of this is the true secret and the meaning of the chariot of the gods. It's not referring to aliens or UFOs. It's referring to the inner potential of the enlightened physiology. It's referring to the Most High, the chariot or the throne of God within us, within our consciousness, our own physiology, our own psychic potential. The king, or another, the Sun King, the Solar King, the hero of Heru, rides the eagle or the winged serpent. The serpent represents the lower nature, whereas it sprouts wings, becomes the feathered serpent, and it takes flight as the higher nature. And by taming our lower nature, that's how we train our dragon and utilize and harness our core primal basal potential and reach and soar into the heights of heaven, or the heights of higher consciousness, higher awareness, represented by the phoenix, the eagle, the falcon, as Horus or Heru is the hero, comes from Hor or Har or Haru or Horu or Heru, meaning the high flying one. So I want to include that. So again, in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3, we covered the significance and the meaning of not just the serpent and the goddess itself, but also the serpent and the goddess in the relation to the caverns of the underworld and the feminine aspects of negativity, or in other words, the feminine principles, the feminine qualities of the caverns of the underworld, which is the essence of water, wetness, cool, wet, moist, associated with the caves and the caverns of the earth goddess, the dark hole in the ground leading to the abyss of the underworld where the caves go. And hence this is further reinforced in the actual medical anatomy of the female genitalia, where we find her corpus cavernosum, which is literally her cavernous body of the clitoris. And if you guys remember from my last video upload with my radio show about talking about the origins of mythology and a lot of symbolism and things like that, from my last video upload that I did, we were talking about how when I used to work at Natural Bridge Caverns as a tour guide, I was talking about how there's types of flow stones in the caverns that we nickname cave bacon because of the layers of the calcite crystals that create different mineral deposits which make it look like bacon. And bacon is, of course, strips or sheets of meat. And so the tour guides, we had inside jokes and stuff, and we had a passage in the caverns that was nicknamed the birth canal. And when you go through this passage called the birth canal, it was a narrow passage, so you go through it, and there'd be these flow stones of cave bacon, or also nicknamed cave curtains, on both sides of the passageway. And so it looked exactly like a female labia. And so I would tell that to some of my tours sometimes, and I would have gotten fired if anyone would have figured that out. But my guests were always really cool about it, and they appreciated my esoteric insights that I would share on the tours. And so, yeah. So it was nicknamed Cave Bacon or Cave Curtains, and in the last radio show I was making a joke about how, there's in slang terms you call the vulva the meat drapes, so it's this whole correlation of the cavern, the goddess caverns, and the labia and her cavernosum and her meat drapes, her meat curtains, and so of course it's just a whole nother layer to it. So if you guys remember that last show, I thought this would be funny to bring it up again, and so poignant and so symbolic. So, which is the part that fills with blood, and that's what gives a female an erection. So it's literally the caverns of the goddess, her corpus cavernosum, her cavernous body. And so, of course, we also find this in mythology from the ancient traditions of the wise Sibyl, or the Sapientiae Sibylla. And, of course, a Sibyl is a divining was someone who can divine or tell the future. It is a wise sage, a wise seer, and particularly the Sapientia Sibylla was the serpent, the divining serpent, the serpent goddess of the caverns of the underworld. Such as medieval Italians remember the prophetic Sibyls of ancient Cumae in the Bay of Napoli, where the Sibylla lived in a subterranean paradise of caverns full of marvels and treasures. There the immortal Sibylla and her fairy women regularly assumed the serpent form. They taught the ancient arts of magic. Seekers entered through a grotto with a magical spring-fed lake. So you have the waters, the caverns, the goddess, the magic, the divining, and the foretelling of the future. And so this is the significance, again, of the corpus cavernosum of the clitoris, which is, again, homologous or symbolically representative of the goddess Wadjet, of the ancient Egyptian serpent-winged goddess Wadjet. Not just looking like, technically the clitoris is essentially like a little snake jutting out from the body with her corpus cavernosum resembling the wings of the goddess Wadjet. So literally you have this sort of, and of course this is more prominent in the male anatomy, in which the male anatomy is more readily recognized as a serpent. But of course, as we covered in those last films, the female anatomy is exactly identical to the male anatomy. They're just slightly different in morphology, but all the main components and parts are there. For example, the clitoris is literally, it's just, the male penis is literally just an enlarged and extended clitoris. So the male just continues growing while the female stays just a short little snake, a short little clitoris there, and with not just that, but with the wings, the cavernous wings. Just so she is the winged serpent, and her complete with her caverns, her cavernosum. So this is this magical divining serpent goddess of the underworld, the winged serpent goddess. Once again, and yet I've connected this again as being as above, so below the belt. Yet again, because you have, again, as I'm showing here, the winged serpent goddess of the ascension, and the crown of the skull is yet again so below the belt in the sacral regions. And so again, you have the wings, and literally the sun disk of Wadjet is literally correspondent to the clitoris, the solar disk, the little disk, the little halo, the little ring, complete with the wings and the serpent-like body, and complete with the Shen ring, which would be the vaginal opening. So you have these symbolic correspondences, these symbolic references, which, even though is probably not anything what it was originally, what these depictions are originally intended to depict, it is still an entirely symbolic and meaningful sync here. And of course, your Oreus is the serpent, again, worn on the pharaoh's third eye. And so again, Wadjet, actually comes from Egyptian widget. There weren't vowels, so it was just the consonants of widget, W-D-Y-T, widget. So it's the widget, which literally meant the green one. But again, she's the winged and feathered serpent goddess. And so it's funny and both serendipitous how the clitoris literally juts out from the body just like a little widget. And a widget literally means a thingy, a gizmo, or a contraption. Usually attributed to a little functioning button or a mechanism. So the clitoris is literally the little widget that juts out from the body, the little mechanism, the little contraption, the little button, the mechanism, the widget. And so of course, widget is literally the same etymological essence of the jet, and the same symbolic essence of the jet, which is the flying serpent. It is the winged serpent flying through the air. And so this is the flying Herma. This was the ancient Roman fashionist, which literally was the embodiment of the divine phallus, or literally the divine masculine, the divine phallus itself, referring to either the god fashionist or any of his effigies, amulets, and spells used to invoke the power of the fashionist, to use the masculine magic, male protection and male strength and virility, which was the ancient Roman form of snake magic, of the phallic magic, of the masculine magic, which essentially was the male counterpart to the Norse. For supporters and patrons, I'll be happy to shoot you a link for that. And I find it very intriguing and also pretty funny and interesting that how this particular temple, this goddess temple entrance, portal of initiation through the yoni, is literally it's depicting the sacred entrance being guarded by the sharp teeth of the mythical vagina dentata, which was a myth of men had this phobia, this fear of intercourse with a woman for fear that she has teeth in the south mouth, literally the south mouth, and for fear of having their member bitten off by the ferocious goddess. So it's highly significant, highly symbolic, that I was able to find this image somewhere along the way throughout my research, and I don't know where I found it from, but I was like, oh my god, yes. It's literally, I can't make this stuff up. So yeah, it's literally, it's got the teeth. It's the guardian of the entranceway, because for those the initiate who seeks, who is not worthy of entrance into the temple, this is what the gateway is for. It is the gauntlet. It is the passage of the trial by passage. The rite of passage is what it literally is, which is why we find this all throughout Hollywood storytelling, as well as old esoterica mythology, the world over. So this is why we find it in the mythical fables such as Lord of the Rings, the gateway of initiation through the twin pillars of I forget who the name of the kings of the twin pillars, that they enter the gauntlet through the initiation down through the rapids, into into the land of Gondor. And we also find it's highly significant in the Neverending Story, as the world famous Atreyu, the hero's journey passing through the gateway of initiation, where those who are not worthy with false intentions get destroyed upon entry. And so this is why you have to have the virtuous qualities. You have to be strong and confident and honest and have integrity in order to pass your way successfully through the gateway of initiation. It is the trial by fire. It is the purification ritual. And of course, since I've now just brought this up again, back in Symbols of Power Part 2 and then rehashed again in Part 3, we covered fully the significance of the symbolism of the two cherubim which guard the Ark of the Covenant. Again, the Ark, the spark, the covenant between the two hemispheres, between the two polarities, the gateway, again, the sphinx, the two sphinxes of the wings of the cherubim, as we covered back in Symbols of Power Part 2 once again. So, again, this is represented by the ancient Egyptian winged disc, the winged sun, which, again, holds directly between the two Kundalini serpents, which is the very symbol, the ultimate epitome of the symbolism of consciousness and enlightenment. The sacred 101 of the gateway, the entranceway of the sun of consciousness, the enlightenment between the twin pillars, between the twin serpents, between the dual dragons, between, what have you, on and on and on and on and on. These infinite motifs of the same recurring underlying truth of all stories and of all mythology and of all religions and all theology, the light of consciousness within man, the gateway of initiation into infinite eternal consciousness of death and rebirth, which is why the entire Masonic tradition is all about entering through 3 or 4 gateways, 3 or 4 doorways, which need to be unlocked. And this is symbolized in the Masonic 3 ladders. With the doorways. Again, you are ascending the ladder to heaven, the stairway to heaven, Jacob's ladder. You are ascending the ladder to consciousness up the spine, which is why the 3 gateways of initiation are literally the anatomical centers, the gateways of initiation inside the body. Again, which is first the base gateway, which is the yoni, the portal of initiation, the sacral region, the sexual region, which needs to be unlocked, and the energy, the Kundalini energy, travels through that gateway, through that doorway, into the second initiation doorway, which is the heart center. Again, the sacred sphere of the heart, or again, the golden egg of the heart once again. And once that initiation is unlocked, then again, you pass through the third gateway, which is the throat, the throat chakra, the vocal cords, literally, again, the yoni, the second yoni, up in the throat. And then the final and last gateway of initiation is the fornix, the gateway of initiation in the very center of the brain, at the thalamus, at the uppermost pinnacle, at the head of the caduceus coil of the enlightenment of consciousness. This is why we also find it in Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One, which the whole story, the whole journey is about the hero entering into this journey of searching for the golden Easter egg. And the whole movie is about an Easter egg hunt. Not just for Easter eggs as clues, but literally for the golden Easter egg, where this is why they show in the movie posters, they show you, join the quest, which is why the heroes enter into the quest through the gateway of initiation. You are joining the quest. You are seeking for the golden egg. And so again, it's also in mythology, as student of Carl Jung, Eric Newman, psychologist, philosopher, has relayed one such myth in which a quote-unquote a fish inhabits the vagina of the vagine of the terrible mother. And again, we've covered the chaos mother, the terrible mother goddess in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 as well. Primarily Part 3. So go back and see that full film, because the terrible dragon goddess mother is going to be a significant and recurring theme all throughout mythology and storytelling the world over. And the hero archetype is the man who overcomes and slays, again, or who conquers, or who tames, and as we covered in Symbols of Power Part 3, the hero who slays her. He lays her. It's a symbolic, allegorical mythology for sexual conquest, but not just conquest, an overcoming, a union. It represents a conquering of one's lower nature. And so in doing so, he breaks the teeth out of her vagine and in so makes her into a woman. But the folklore and the story tales were essentially designed to caution against the dangers of unknown women and thus to discourage rape. And also included in the mythology of Hinduism of Shiva, where Shiva and Parvati's own son tries to kill Shiva and get him to surrender his wife, which is actually his own mother. But so then another so what happens? So then another Asura takes the form of Parvati, which is Shiva's consort, in order to seduce and kill Shiva. So he takes the form of Shiva's wife in order to seduce Shiva and then kill him with a toothed vagine in order to avenge Shiva's son, who was slain by Shiva trying to... So it's really weird, but so you get the point of the message. And between the portal of initiation lies the golden sun, the golden egg, the sun, the golden light of consciousness, the light of illumination, the light of enlightenment, which is the goal, the seeking process, the unity of the one light, the one mind of infinite consciousness, of source consciousness of God, the light of God, the consciousness of God, which is why Jesus is literally is considered the gateway when he says, "Nobody shall come inside my Father except through me," because Jesus is the gateway. He is the sun. He is literally the sun, the light of the world, the light of consciousness, the light within us, the inner sun of the thalamus within the brain, golden egg of consciousness, the light of illumination, the golden sun within man, the sun of man, the sun in man. Because I can't just leave it, unexplored. So that is why it's representing this gateway between the two, the portal of initiation, if you will. It is the portal of consciousness, representing that light, the light bulb of consciousness, the central channel, the Sushumna, which travels up the cosmic axis into the Enlightenment. And this is why the golden egg geometry of the sacred mandorla, ankh, or the ru, the gateway, represents again the vaginal passageway, also which is the so below the belt correspondence to its direct counterpart, which corresponds above the belt in the again, which is the second mouth or gateway. Literally, once we enter the mouth into the throat of the vocal cords, is also the mandorla almond shaped ru, the gateway, the mouthway between the two between the gateway between the two vocal cords, which come together and unite as one to create and give birth to sound and give birth to speech, to vocal. And so again, this is why that gateway, the mouthway, literally is again, the throat is again the exact as above correspondence to so below the belt in the vaginal passageway, as we've covered fully throughout the Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 films. And again, it represents the Trinity, the triune, tripartite aspect of creation, and its final and culminating pinnacle in the apex of the third ventricle of the brain, where the pineal gland is located between the two hemispheres, between the diencephalon, between the two heads of the thalamus, of the diencephalon, between the two lobes, the two hemispheres of the brain, between the two pillars, if you will. Crucified upon the tree of life, the tamarisk tree, the tree of life, is actually the arbor vitae, this is something that a profound discovery that I've made, is that the tree of life, Osiris or the slain harvest god being sacrificed on the tree of life, on the arbor vitae, as depicted here of Thoth describing the name of Seti the First upon the tree of life, is literally depicting the arbor vitae inside the cerebellum of the brain, which is literally where where Jesus and Osiris, or the slain sacrificed god, were crucified on the tree. And so the ancient tree of life has been associated as the acacia tree in ancient Egypt, which is known for its production of dimethyltryptamine, the psychedelic component, which, as we've covered in Symbols of Power Part 1 and Part 2 Part 2 and Part 3, is again a major component of the brain produced by the pineal gland, but it's the majority of which is produced in the lungs, actually by the alveoli in the lungs, which also greatly resemble, again, the arbor vitae here in the cerebellum, as we're observing here. And so the ancient Egyptians, and as well as the ancient Hindu Vedas, were extremely masterful in their dissection and preparation and study of the human anatomy and physiology. A myriad of correspondence between deified archetypes, theological motifs, and symbols that we find corresponding with the human anatomy, and the more clear and obvious this conclusion becomes. For example, yet again, the depictions of the god Thoth, the god of knowledge, scripture, math, and all things intellectual, and the god of wisdom, inscribing the name of Seti the First upon the arbor vitae, which is the exact symbolism of, again, the arbor vitae, where we get the cerebellum of the brain from the arbor vitae of the ancient Egyptian depictions of the cerebellum of the brain, which is literally where the resurrection occurs. It is the very essence of the resurrection itself, not just for the production of dimethyltryptamine in the brain, but literally this is the cerebellum. What I personally, it's not medically or actually called this, but I personally ascribe this to being literally called the cross of the cerebellum is what I call it, because there is a component, a core structure of white matter located within the arbor vitae in the cerebellum when viewed from every angle of the scans of the brain. And the arbor vitae is located deep at the deep core of the cerebellum, and it is consisted of white matter, so-called for its branch or tree-like or fern-like appearance. And it brings sensory and motor information to and from the cerebellum and regulates hand-eye coordination and basic motor functions. And so this is literally, it produces a cross on the cerebellum. And so this is exactly the tree of life where the resurrection takes place, where the resurrected, the slain God is crucified, and where the slain God is resurrected. And this is why the slain God is always depicted as being crucified on the tree. We find this in Conan the Barbarian, crucified upon the tree of woe. Again, echoing this mythology of Woden crucified upon the tree, upon the Yggdrasil tree. And again, the various depictions of Odin are also depicted as the hanged man, again depicting the death of the season, the underworld of Saturn, the hanged Lord hanged upside down upon the cross, what is known as St. Andrew's cross, the cross of the upside down crucifixion. Which again is the essence of the hanged man. So again, the path of the fool of Jesus throughout the year, from the spring to the winter, and on and on and on throughout the path of the sun. So from resurrection from death to resurrection and eternal life. And so this is exactly also depicted why I've discovered a huge monumental discovery that I don't know how I found this, but I literally just looking at I was looking for one of the posters for Ridley Scott's film Prometheus, which was again about the alien films and about the progenitor race who created the human race. Essentially what we would call the Anunnaki, if you ascribe to Sitchin's false versions of the Anunnaki as the progenitor race, which it literally has nothing to do with that. If you study the actual anthropology, if you study the actual linguistics and the actual ancient history, Zechariah Sitchin was literally the alone in his interpretations of that. And the reason why he was alone was because he was a Freemasonic shill, a complete mouthpiece designed to promote this false alien agenda to the mass population, whereas every scholar completely disavows what Sitchin had concluded based on literally zero evidence for his interpretations of the linguistics, whereas every other interpretation was very similar and a lot more credible. But we're going way far off topic here. I mean, But so again, this is why I've discovered that Ridley Scott also depicted the crucifixion of the alien resurrection of the cross upon the cerebellum, upon literally the fourth. And all right, so we're going to get into it, which is literally the cruce of the brain, literally the crucible, where the crucible takes place and you are crucified on the arbor vitae of the cerebellum, which again, the pineal gland, produces the dimethyltryptamine of the tamarisk tree of the brainstem, where the Christ is crucified. And just as we have the same symbolism of Christ crucified upon the brainstem once again, as the cross is literally the cerebellar cross, where the neurons and the intersections occur in the brainstem, which is literally the crux. It is the cross. It is literally the cruce of the brain. But so this is how the sacrificed and slain and resurrected God is depicting the process of the human anatomy, of the occult esoteric anatomy of the human body, which is, again, as we've covered, as above, so below the belt. It is the Christ being crucified at the cerebellum of the brain, which is depicted as being crucified on the tree of knowledge, which is the central nervous system, the cerebral tree. The central nervous tree. And of course, the tamarisk, it goes even deeper. The tamarisk tree was associated with the psychedelic brew, or the psychedelic qualities of the dimethyltryptamine, the DMT, which is also produced in altered states of consciousness, as we're talking about the divination practices of the psychedelic rituals of the volva.
Drink the vision mead of knowledge, to learn what it is to live and die in honor, to be in battle slain, and in death rewarded by the Valkyrie's embrace. The warrior maidens will carry you to the shivering depths of Valhalla.
And this is exactly why the crucifix, the Jesus Christ, is literally the exact same symbol as the Greek sai, as the runic algis, the witch's staff, the witch's broom. It's the staff of divination, of the divine foresight. The algis, Proto-Germanic algis, became Old English elks, or in other words, elks. And so the elder Futhark was the upward, and the younger Futhark became inverted as the downward. And it was later transcribed or given the sound value of Latin X. So that's where it went from Z to X. So it went from the Z rune to the X rune, and that's where it was again changed from algis, which was the Z, into the elks, or the X, and Old Italic alphabets, which was again in turn derived from the Greek psi, which was given the value of K, of X. Again, that sound, the ek, the k, the ek sound. And so the Anglo-Saxon rune for algis is variously recorded as aelx, or aelx, ilx, ilx, eolx, or ilix, or elux. And all of these are very significant, very telling for the Latin sound and the Latin value of x, or ks, x, x. But so the symbolism was used during World War II eras as for being upward for born and downward for died, which the downward comes from the hanged man position of Odin on the tree, sacrificed on the Yggdrasil, on the world tree, on the tree of life, which was literally the winter season, the season of death, of the king of the winter season, Saturn, Odin, the king of death, and the hanging on the tree, which is the origin of the tarot hanged man card. And so this is why the downward runic symbolism, it's the symbolism for the peace sign, which is again the symbol of rest and peace, again death and peace, the absolute bottom of the year, the winter season of the year, the death of the year. And so the X is essentially the hex. And so the X in Spanish is equis, Greek, which means snake. So we're talking about the X, which is the crossroads, the crossing and the intersection points of the two snakes. And of course, in Egyptian was known as the Heka, the Heka was literally the god of magic, the god of magic and medicine, the personification of magic itself. And as Joshua J. Mark for Ancient History Encyclopedia.eu brilliantly has a brilliant breakdown and a brilliant article on all of this. And So Heka was literally the personification of, again, magic and healing, and he was literally the origin of the Ekis, of the dual snakes intertwining upon the pole. He carried a staff entwined with two serpents, the symbol originally associated with healing from the god Ninazu of Sumer, and was adopted for Heka and traveled to Greece, where it became associated with their healing god, son of Apollo, which was Asclepius, known as the serpent and the pole, and today known as the caduceus, the symbol of the medical profession and healing. The gods of healing and magic. And Heka was also attributed to a trinity of creation, essentially with Heka, Sia, and Hu were representative of the powers of creation, sustenance, and death of the universe. So, which was akin to the Hindu tripartite aspects of creation or God as generation, operation, and dissolution of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, as we covered in Symbols of Power Part 3, much more in depth and thoroughly. And so Heka was linked to the creative aspects of both the heart and the tongue. The heart was considered the seat of one's individual personality, thought, and feeling, while the tongue gave expression to these aspects and brought them into existence. So again, this is referring to the tripartite aspects of the mental, the vocal, and the genital creation. So there are actually 4 levels: mental, vocal, heart level, and genital or sacral creation. So, but tripartite as the trinity of creation, as we covered earlier on and in the previous films. And so again, the symbolism of the Heka is literally the symbols of the crook and flail, the cross of Osiris, or the cross of the pharaoh, the cross of the serpent king, who crosses, again, the X, which was symbolized as the crossroads of death. And this is not in any way actually legitimately connected to any type of scholarly interpretation, but the flail itself, the Heka is the crook, but the flail is actually more attributed to Heka itself, because again, it's literally like a broken form of the Algiz rune, and it was used for threshing the grain, the agriculture, and associated again with the shepherd and the agriculture, just as Osiris was the shepherd and the agriculture, just as Jesus was also the shepherd and the agriculture. And again, representing the cross and the crossroads of the crus, the crucifixion, the crucible. It's the fashionist from the kyok. And so the protective function of the phallus is usually related to the virile or regenerative powers of an erected phallus. Thus, in most cases, the emotion, the shame, or the laughter created by the obscenity is the power that diverts the evil eye. It's what wards off the envy and the glamour charm, because it brings humor and it brings reality. It brings you back into the moment. It brings you back into the joyous sort of satire of things. And this is why I swear I must have just stepped out of ancient Rome, because it's exactly everything that I do. I mean, I literally couldn't have made this up, if I wanted to, but it's see, the people that know me, they're like, are you serious? I'm like, shut up. I'm like, you're making this up. And so this, what I forgot to mention was that this is the origins of fashion, of where fashion comes from. Is essentially it is glamour magic. It is a form of spell cast over peoples to control them, to keep them addicted to this stupid, wild, ridiculous world of insane fashion trends by commanding the eye, commanding the gaze, enchantment. It is getting lost in Nvidia. So while it's most well known that the female holds sway over the snake charming and the snake enchantment over the male snake, we cannot also forget that the male snake holds a fascination of its own, and the ability to charm and to bewitch and to enchant and fascinate of its own accord. And of course, the etymology of the jet comes from Old French get, vulgar Latin jactus, which means a throwing or an ejection, which is literally gives us our words abject, such as ejaculate, or other words associated to eject or ejection from the jet, the squirting out, which literally is a spout or a nozzle for creating a jet of fluid, and expulsion for creating an ejaculation, which is why the serpent, the cobra, is literally a spitting or an ejaculating serpent, just as we covered back in Symbols of Power Part 2. But it goes even deeper because the jet also contains the verbiage meaning usage to shoot forward or to shoot out, to project, again to ejaculate, meaning to jut out, just as the clitoris again extends or it juts out from the cavernosum, just as the snake or the serpent protrudes or juts out from its hole in the ground, just as we have the jetties, which is where we get the jetty, which is a protrusion that it extends outward from the dock or from the port. And so go back and see that full film for so many more syncs and connections for the entire context of that. But this is just the new additions that I hadn't included in that presentation that I also wanted to include somewhere. And so I will eventually maybe add this to the full thing to give you the entire contextual story about that. And the vulture, which was the serpent and the bird, again, this is worn on the crown or the third eye, the brow of the pharaoh, of the serpent king, so who was the ascended cobra, or supposedly symbolically to represent. And so again, we have the various aspects of the serpent and the egg, the serpent guarding the fruit of the tree of life, which is the serpent or the myocardial fibers wrapped around the egg, this golden egg shape of the human heart, of the myocardial muscles, which are vortex spiral muscles of the human heart. So the Orphic egg is literally, it's the serpent wrapped around the golden ratio egg, the serpent protecting this most sacred knowledge of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is the mathematics of the golden, to mathematically create a golden ratio egg. And so this is why the golden ratio egg shape is found all throughout the human anatomy and the human physiology, from all the most prominent organs. In both the male and female, we have the egg-shaped uterus, as well as the egg-shaped male prostate correspondent, as well as the male eggs, the huevos, the testes, the egged testicles. So again, we have the egg as above in the brain, Midgard as the egg, golden egg, yet again emotional level in the heart, yet again the golden ratio egg, yet again in the sacral, from the uterus, the prostate, and the testes. So you have the three tripartite, the trinity of creation, the three levels of creating in mental, emotional, and physical. So this is yet again the serpent and the egg, the cosmic Orphic egg, guarding the sacred knowledge of the human physiology. Okay, so let's dive into this here, because we got to go deeper on this. So again, what we're looking at is the recapitulation. Is you start out your life from the seed, or from the fish, the nun, the seed, which is what the sperm is. The spermatozoon is it's the seed. It's an egg with a tail attached to it. It is the seed, or the fish, in Hebrew letter nun, the seed, the fish. The sperm, it's the fish that swims, that impregnates the egg, which then, so basically you start out as a sperm, and then you just grow into a very larger sperm. The sperm implants itself, it penetrates the egg, and it essentially it stays there, and it grows into a large human being with the spinal column, but it still remains as the egg with the tail attached. So that is what the human central nervous system is. It comes from the sperm, which the sperm contains all the genetic information within it. It literally is the information center. And so that's what stores all the information, and that is contained within the central nervous system. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a cross section of an X-ray of the full scan of the human body, and we're looking at the level here at a cross section of the pelvic level. And so that actually reveals an identical resemblance to the serpent energy, or the recapitulation of our serpentine nature of the human anatomy, which we've covered all throughout the Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3, numerous ways that that the serpent is recapitulated in the human anatomy. We covered the Jacobson's organ, the vomeronasal cavity. We covered we covered various aspects of Kundalini and human sexual anatomy and sexual functionality in the Symbols of Power Part 3 film. So go back and see that for so much more. But so this is yet another version of that. And so I was looking at this X-ray of the human spinal system to show the recapitulation of the sperm within the central nervous system, and I noticed that the cross section here at the pelvic region is so I've mapped it, the key points of reference. The epidural space is the central nervous system, or the cerebrospinal system that flows in between the vertebrae. Here we have the vertebral disc. These are the spinal nerves which hang from the central nervous system. We have the facet joint which connects the vertebrae to the pelvic region. And again, the epidural space in between the central nervous system here. So it is an identical, if we notice the specific points of reference, it is identical to the serpent's head, to a snake's head. And we can look at so I noticed it was exactly the same as the emerald boa. And this is if you look at the reference points, just look at the points of reference. Look at the nostrils right here in the center, the angle of the nostrils. So just look at this. Look at the angles of the nostrils where I have the reference points marked. And look at the specific angles of the shape of the nose. And look at the exact reference points of the chin, of the bilateral symmetry divided between the chin. And look at the exact reference points of the angles of the Jacobson's organ, or the heat sensing pits. Look at those exact angular correspondence, the exact symmetry. And then notice, of course, the most prominent feature is notice the eyes. I mean, so just look at these points of reference. It's astounding. Look at the angles of the nose and the angles of what would be the vertebrae inside the pelvic cavity. I mean, look at that. Just look at the angular reference to the nostrils here. And again, the angles of the vomeronasal, of the heat-sensing pits. So, of course, again, we have the cosmic egg and the sun and the earth, yet again. And, of course, the cosmic egg. And so yet again we have the symbol of the vertebral disc being symbolically portrayed at the center between the two eyes on the serpent's head. So again, it's symbolic of the third eye, the inner sun, of the central sun of consciousness and enlightenment. And of course the oreo serpent literally means to rise, to ascend. It literally means to climb, to ascend, to raise up. So again, we're talking about the lifting up of the serpent, lifting up the Son of Man, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so too you must lift up the Son in man, the Son of Man within your inner consciousness to the light of enlightenment. Of course, as we covered in Symbols of Power Part 3, the significance of the serpent's eye, the all-seeing eye within the triangle, and the serpent's head is the triangle. So of course we're talking about the parietal eye, the eye on the back of the reptile's head, the parietal eye, the eye at the center of the triangle, which is again, it's the symbol of the capstone, the Enlightenment, which is the sun within man. So again, the vertebral disc, which refers to the ascension of the cerebrospinal fluid, of the spinal energy, of the electric energy of the spine, being symbolized as the inner sun within the vertebral disc of the center of the snake's head. And again, the Oreos, which is why the Oreos is literally of the goddess Wadjet, as the winged serpent, is literally depicted as the ascension energy with the vertebral disc upon the forehead, which is the vertebral disc upon the head of the snake's head, which was literally the solar disc, the disc of enlightenment, the disc of consciousness of the sun. But so that is the serpent, the snake oil. So again, what we're talking about here is we are talking about the serpent priesthood. We are talking in esoteric American secret societies. We have tons of chapters, such as the Order of the Book and Snake, the Brotherhood of the Snake, and in all sorts of other cultural myths, in folk tales, in mythology, and all throughout theology. We find the Order of the Snake from ancient Egyptian serpent priesthood, the royal divinity. The serpent is the symbol of royalty, divinity, and wisdom and nobility of the highest echelons, of the highest class, the ascension of the knowledge of the consciousness from root to crown, of the Kundalini ascension, the serpentine electric energy of the human body, of the human consciousness, the peak to the pinnacle of the apex of knowledge, all the way from base to skull, from root to crown, from valley to peak to pinnacle, on and on and on. So this is the divine serpent wisdom of that serpentine energy, which we covered all throughout Symbols of Part 2 and all throughout Symbols of Part 3. Literally the entire films were all about that. So this brings us full circle back to this root that everything revolves around, that all of my work just keeps coming back to in infinite different ways, and we just can't get away from this, no matter nor would we really want to be. It just keeps coming back to this and revolving around this, and every presentation that I do just keeps coming back to this root core divine wisdom and knowledge. So the ancient priest class of the Brotherhood of the Snake, literally the pharaoh was the Oreo serpent, which literally means to climb, to rise or climb a hill, to literally means to ascend. And so again, this is why the pharaoh is literally, he is the serpent king. The pharaoh's adornments are literally meant to mimic and to represent symbolically. And so again, this is the knowledge of the ruling of the divine priesthood, the royalty, the nobility, such as the ancient wise seers, the ancient knowledgeable ones, the wise ones, the sorcerers, the wizards, the alchemists, the priests, the ones who retained knowledge and wisdom of the ages. They were the scribes, the ones who had the knowledge of language and writing, of mathematics and science, of weights and measures, of astronomy, of archaeology, of you know, on and on and on, of architecture, of masonry, of building, of all of this. The most advanced knowledge that we've ever possessed is all represented by the symbols of the serpent, which the symbol is the guardian of that fruit of the tree of knowledge, that fruit of the tree which stems from the fruit, which is the egg of the or the seed of the recapitulation of the human body, of the seed of the serpent, which guards that tree of knowledge. Once again, I think I already covered this in the previous voiceover, so I'm going to have to go back and check to see if I've covered this already. But yeah, so this is the knowledge of why the Caduceus and the Asclepius, the knowledge of the Greek mythology of the serpent and of the pole, the serpent and the staff, the symbols of wisdom and healing and health. Knowledge of the human physiology attained by the true illuminates, the true initiates of the wisdom of human physiology and of the universal secrets of science and of knowledge, of gnosis, and the knowledge of hypnosis, and the knowledge of prognosis and diagnosis. All these different branches and forms of ways that we come to attain knowledge, to attain knowing, both within and without, as gnosis and as science, the two dualistic aspects of reality. So these ruling serpent kings, the serpent priest class, is also why we find the shape-shifting serpent in the movie Conan as in such a symbolic scene. Again, he is the king. He is transforming. He is shape-shifting into a serpent as the divine serpent king, the divine ruler. And even on his hood, we find the symbols of the two serpents and the eye and the egg, the two Kundalini serpents and the all-seeing eye of ascension within the center of the skull, as we covered. I think I covered this in the beginning of the presentation. I'm glad I added that clip to give this full context. Otherwise, I would have to show you my whole entire films to give you this context. But so this is why the people, there's a lot of arguments out there about the etymology of the Vatican, and there is no actual real, definitive source of what the etymology of Vatican is. Some people argue that it comes from that it means divining serpent, but that combines two entirely different etymological root languages, which are Mayan and Latin. So that would combine Latin as Vaticus, which literally I believe it means diviner, and Can, which is Mayan or Aztec for meaning serpent, such as Kukulkan, which literally means feathered serpent. But so this is referring, so there's so again, but this actually refers to the priest class, the knowledgeable ones. Once again, the divining serpents, the sages, the seers, the sorcerers, the vizier, the priesthood to the king, to the royalty. Which is why we find the serpent all throughout the Vatican, such as the Vatican Hall, which is literally St. Peter's Hall, which is literally the serpent, which is the viper. It is the venom. It is the venom of God. Oh, I didn't cover this yet already. Samael, in other words, the alternate angelic name for what was referenced or likened to Satan in the biblical story of Jacob ascending the ladder to heaven, who wrestled with the angel Samael, which was allegedly to have been Satan. Samael means venom of God, poison or venom of God. And so that's where the Gnostic master, divine supreme lord, cult leader Samael on Weor, or however the hell you say that stupid name. What a stupid name to have. But yeah, so he named himself after Samael, the angel of Satan, venom of God, that Jacob wrestled with on the ladder to heaven to ascend and to see God face to face through the process of ascension. My voiceover got ruined, So yeah, this is the ascension from root to crown, which is where Jacob's ladder, the ladder to heaven, the two intertwining serpents, which guard the golden egg of knowledge. Again, the guardians of the knowledge, the goose that laid the golden egg, with Jack and the Beanstalk, who climbs the Axis Mundi to heaven to attain the golden goose eggs, the golden egg of knowledge, that egg of wisdom, of enlightenment, of the human thalamus at the top, that is kissed and protected by the two serpents, which also represents, and we'll go so much deeper to this in future presentations. We're not going to get off into those tangents right here. Some of the favorite lyrics from one of my favorite songs by a Friends band goes as follows. I've been placed in a position many fear. A voice traveled up my spine, and he whispered in my ear, and he said, carry my voice and I will carry you. Now spread your every word just to cover up their wounds. Carry my voice and I will carry you. Carry my voice and I will carry you. But so again, Jacob ascended the ladder to heaven. These are the dual ascending and descending tracks, representing the duality, the polarity of the human central electric spinal system, which is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, or also the motor and the sensory neurons, which are the ascending and descending tracks of the human spinal column, which represent the two angels ascending and descending the ladder of heaven, as described in Jacob's vision of the ladder to heaven. where he wrestled or struggled with the archangel Samael, which literally means the venom or poison of God. So this is the snake oil. The cerebrospinal fluid of the human spinal system is the snake oil, and it was likened to an oil, but it's not actually an oil. It is actually a salty saline solution of solution of salvation, of the salivation, the saliva, the salt that saves, the preservative that saves your life and gives you the electric spark, that eternal life that is ignited within you. And salt, again, is a preservative. It saves. And so that is the oil of this. That is the snake oil. It is the serpent staff, which is the snake oil, the venom of the snake. The snake venom is the venom of God that Jacob wrestled with the archangel Samael, who was also known as the deceiver in the Hebrew Old Testament, in the Hebrew Torah. He was known as the angel of death. He was known as the deceiver or as the trickster. So again, the snake oil, the salesman, the deceiver, the trickster, the forked tongue, the venom of God, the snake oil, the oil of the lamp, of the consciousness of enlightenment, which is again the story of the genie and the lamp of enlightenment, with the serpent vizier, the serpent symbolism of the high priesthood. But so that's the essence of what we will be covering here, is how the snake oil salesman uses the spells, and they use the neurolinguistic programming to sell you bullshit that you don't need, to sell you BS products that, number one, are completely useless, completely, sometimes often even harmful, detrimental, or just completely unnecessary, completely useless, and just a waste of money. They are trying to rip you off, and they do this by sweet talking you, by smooth talking you, with their this is awesome, this is a great selling point. Ooh, listen to the sweet tone of my voice. So that's literally what Silas Snakebreath was. That's what I was. And the whole point of these characters, they're always out to get the women. They're the deceivers who just want to woo and to sweet talk women, to smooth talk women so that they can take advantage of them. This is what salesmen do. That's why Silas Snakebreath was the snake oil salesman. And everyone loved the character. I hated that. It was so stupid, but it's so poignant now, though. But so Wormtongue, Jafar, these characters, they are the snake oil, they are the smooth, they're not even always smooth talking, but they are the one who uses the snake tongue, the forked tongue. They're the snake in the grass, trying to get the woman. They are trying to win the affections, and they're trying to weasel their way in, to slither their way into that woman. But yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So look here, let's look at the examples.
His passing is hard to accept, especially now that your brother has deserted you.
Leave me alone, Snake!
But you are alone. Who knows what you've spoken to the darkness? So fair, so cold, like a morning of pale spring still clinging to winter's chill.
Your words are poison.
We also find this in, we find it in the Jungle Book, where the serpent character, the snake, known as Ka, she controls he, in various different versions, he or she, it controls the main character's mind using the spells, the forked tongue of the serpent. Using Harry Potter of what's known as parcel tongue, which is essentially, I liken it to basil tongue, which is serpent's, the sharpness of the speech. So in other words, it's using the control of language to control people's perception, keep them under a spell, by a spelling. In other words, casting spells, because the language comes from grammar, which grammar originally comes from a grimoire, which a grimoire is a book of spells, and so it was originally attributed to higher learning, higher knowledge. Grammar literally means the study of higher wisdom, of higher knowledge. And in the ancient world, the only people who were able to read books and to write and had the knowledge of language were the very high priesthood. They were the noble priesthood, the priest class. So in other words, the elite people who usually only had enough money to be able to write down and to go to school to study these things. Coming from ancient Egypt, where only the priest class had enough money to basically to study the art of writing and of language and translation of language and all of that, and through writing down spell books and through the scrolls and the papyrus. So only the priest class were able to afford a book of the dead, which granted their passage into the afterlife. And so this was originally the ways that the priesthood and the priest class used ancient knowledge to control the population. By basically, you control a population by keeping them from the knowledge that you have. So this is how priest classes and priesthoods and the church itself will control the population, is by keeping knowledge locked away and using that knowledge for themselves, but not sharing that knowledge with everyone else.
Hello everyone, my name is Cullen Smith. I'm a published author. Today I would like to introduce you all to my brand new published book, The Hive Mind Invasion of Civilization, a compendium of esoteric science, symbolism, and universal secrets. If you'd like to purchase this book, you can head over to my brand new website that I've set up. It's still very bare bones. There's a lot of work I need to do on the site, but for now it's got the basic things that I need on there until I upload all of my content. You can sign up for the newsletter to receive email updates on all of my posts as I begin to populate the site with all of my archives of articles, books, videos, and films and courses and all of that good stuff. So you'll get notifications as I begin to populate the website with all of my content on it. So that's a good reason to sign up right now, even though there's no content on it yet. But you can pick up my books there. I've got my Hive Mind book. I've also got a couple other titles that I've released for, which are just study aids. They are journals such as Divine Manifestations, a dream journal to log your dream and awakening experiences and to highlight any insights or intuitions that may come to you along your process of growth and exploration of all of this content. I've got a food journal to log your nutritional progress and to log your health and fitness progress as well. And I've got a 50 Days of Gratitude journal as well, and I will be releasing several more titles as well to help expand and explore your own creativity and things of that nature. So these make great gifts for any friends, beloved family, any loved ones. So these are great gifts that you can pick up and also support Lifting the Veil and the work that I do in the process. So feel free and head on over to my brand new website, liftingtheveil.tv. And I will see all of you there. All right, have a great day. Thank you. My name is Cullen Smith. This is Lifting the Veil. You can find all of my full books, presentations, videos, films, articles, posts at subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil. Patreon has suspended this work and my account and income stream for this content. So if you are a supporting patron, then please I ask you to move your support over to subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil. And I have just established a completely free, uncensored, totally free speech social media platform that replaces Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, every other platform all in one on liftingtheveil.locals.com. You can download the Locals app and you can join our group and have totally free speech and totally uncensored, unrestricted content access. And there is also a ton of exclusive content, and I will leave the cited reference links in the description down below. So you can check that out for all of my full content, and I will see you guys in the next video. I rely solely on word of mouth, and the recommended algorithms are not recommending any of my videos or films anymore. My channel has literally been completely restricted, so I rely on your help by sharing my work around if you appreciate it, and leave me your comments. I definitely want to know what you have to share and what you have to think about all of this stuff, and I will see you in the next video.